So hi everyone, welcome. I'm Tracy Anderson, and today we are thrilled to have one of Broadway's best leading men. He's appeared in Broadway shows as well as in movies, television, throughout his career. I know I know you're best known for your record-setting performance on Broadway as the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera. But tell us more about your career. You've played roles in so many Broadway shows, haven't you?
Absolutely, Tracy. It's great to be here, by the way. I'm just have a quick question for you. I don't see anybody else's faces appear. Is that because they're just going to be asking questions from the dark, as it were? Okay. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all here. Yeah, just a little background about myself. I've worked for the better part of 35 years on Broadway. Before that, I kind of have a funny trajectory. I started out in television in Los Angeles. I was an LA kid. When I was just entering high school, my family moved north to Santa Barbara, and I started to really get the acting bug there, and doing lots of theater, lots of musical theater and straight plays and things. But I had an introduction to an agent in Los Angeles, and that's where my career started. I was put under contract at Universal Studios as one of their new talent, where they were developing actors to try to obviously build a star from the ground up. So,
Sorry, my apologies.
oh, that's all right. That's a chime we're all familiar with. So I started out in television, doing a lot of episodic television. I was in everything from the $6 Million Man. This kind of will give you an idea how old I am. To Perry Mason, to Columbo, to the Bionic Woman. That kind of stuff at Universal. Everything that was being shot at Universal, I got a shot at getting the role. Mostly guest parts, and then I worked my way up and started doing leads in television stuff. But I wasn't singing, and I felt like I was hiding one of my strongest talents. So I decided to make the plunge and come to New York, where I now live, and have lived now, as I said, for almost 40 years. And I have worked, I started out, my very first show in New York was opposite Linda Ronstadt in an all-new English language translation of La Boheme at the Public Theater that Joe Papp produced, one of the legendary producers of the American theater, who started the Public Theater. I worked in Sunday in the Park with George, Stephen Sondheim's first musical, and we'll get to Stephen Sondheim a little later because I am going to be conducting a master class in the Stephen Sondheim Songbook, and that's coming up August 16th. So I know Tracy will be very good about helping me to remember to tell you about this, and all of this is available, all of the information about this, as well as signing up for it, is available at BroadwayMentorsProgram.com. So I just wanted to put that out there. So August 16th, we'll be doing a deep dive into Stephen Sondheim's Songbook, the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest composer and lyricist of the American musical of our time, hands down. So many great shows, from Into the Woods, you name it, Sweeney Todd, just so many great things. A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. So we'll be hopefully touching on some really great music, and I hope that you guys will join me for that. So that was my very first show, Sunday in the Park with George, on Broadway, Stephen Sondheim's. I also was in The Secret Garden on Broadway. Anything Goes, we did a great revival at Lincoln Center with Patti LuPone that I was happy to be a part of, which I also did again in London. The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I'm trying to think of all the many shows. She Loves Me, The Kiss of the Spider Woman on Broadway. These were all shows that I was so lucky to be a part of and to spend long runs in. I did a lot of long runs on Broadway. And my last Broadway show was Gigi, the great musical that was turned into a stage production that we did on Broadway a couple of years back, starring a young star named Vanessa Hudgens, who I'm sure people know. So that's kind of a quick overview of the many Broadway shows that I've done. I've continued to dip back into television as well. I've been on The Good Wife and The Blacklist and Elementary and lots of shows, TV shows along the way. But my love is the musical, and my love is storytelling through song, and that's really what we work on. When I work with people, I teach. I teach at NYU as well as on this wonderful new platform that Joy and Tracy are undertaking here that we're all so happy to be a part of. But I will also be teaching individually if people are interested in one-on-one classes. I'm sure Tracy can fill you in on the details of that. I think we have 30 and 45-minute sessions. Is that right, Tracy?
45 and 30, yes.
Yeah. So, so that's kind of an overview of my career. And
Did you, so when you first started, did you study, who did you study with? How do you feel about studying as an actor?
well, it's so important. So I studied. I was kind of unconventional in that in college I majored in history. It was partly just a way of appeasing my parents' worries about me going into the world of the theater as as a profession, because they wanted to be sure I could make a living. Why history was going to be a lucrative thing to study, I don't know, but I always thought there were many things that I could learn from study, and I believe that's true. I don't believe an actor should just study acting. I think it's so important that you study as much of a wealth of a range of subjects, so that you're a well-rounded person with a good foundation of knowledge behind you. Because I think no matter what you do, it's going to serve you well. So I was a history major, but I was studying acting every chance I could get. I had some great mentors of my own. A wonderful actor named Bradford Dillman, who was very famous for his interpretation of Eugene O'Neill's work on Broadway. He played Eugene O'Neill, the Eugene O'Neill character Edmund, in A Long Day's Journey into Night, into the famous revival back in the 1950s, early 60s, and went on to have a wonderful career in movies and television. And he was a great mentor of mine. Taught acting to a handful of young talent, and I was very lucky to be a part of his classes. And so I've studied throughout my career. I continue to go back to work with teachers. I have a wonderful voice teacher I still work with today, whose name is Joan Lader, and she's quite well known in New York and in the theater and movie world. She's a terrific asset that I tap back into as much as I possibly can. So yes, study is so important in building a craft.
Sorry, unmute myself. So you've been teaching a lot as well. How did that all come about?
I was so lucky to be asked to join the faculty at Tisch School of the Arts at NYU about 6 years ago. I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. And I had always wanted to teach, and I had always been kind of every once in a while asked to do a master class here or there, and I loved it so much. There's something that is so wonderfully instructive to me as a teacher to work with actors, because you learn so much as a teacher. There's an old expression: if you want to learn, teach. And I think there's something very true about that. I think there is great surprises that come from working with young actors that I find is constantly feeding my own craft. So
Yeah, that's amazing. If anyone that is attending this webinar wants to submit a question, you can submit a question through the Q&A button that's on your Zoom chat. And Howard would love to answer as many as we can.
yeah, great.
Yeah. Let's see here if we have any. Well, as people are
Yeah,
asking questions,
yeah,
how did you find, um, playing a role like Phantom for so long?
right.
How did you, how were you able to make it fresh and exciting and not get burnt out from it?
Right. So I think I failed to mention Phantom of the Opera when I was listing my credits. I played the Phantom on Broadway more times than anybody in the history of the show. I played the Phantom at the Majestic Theater on Broadway 2,550 times, somewhere around there. I don't know the exact number. Somebody said 2,544, something like that, which is, of course, an enormous number of performances to give for one character in one show. But I must say that it was it was a great experience and a great ride that it lasted over a 10-year period. I played the part for 7 years. So I played the Phantom for 3.5 years to start. And that's a lot of performances all at once. And then I took a couple years off to do other things, and I came back to it. And in fact, one of the shows that I left to do was another Stephen Sondheim show, his latest show, which eventually ended up being called Roadshow. But when we were doing it, under the direction of Hal Prince, it was called Bounce. And we did it in Chicago at the Goodman Theater, and then we went on to Washington, D.C. and played the Eisenhower Theater at Kennedy Center. So, so keeping a role fresh, I want to answer your question, Tracy, is really the job of the actor every night, whether you're doing 100 performances or 10 performances. Every night, you know there's an audience out there that has never seen the show before, or many who have not seen the show before, and you owe it to them to give them your best. So the work that we do in classes, when I'm working with actors individually and also in master classes, is how to craft the actual storytelling and bringing out the storyteller within you so that you know exactly what it is you want to set out to do each night. And of course, you're working with a director who is going to help guide you and give you other suggestions as well. But the important thing about doing a long run is to keep it fresh. And that is really incumbent upon the actor to use his tools, all the tools in your toolbox. I see we have some questions.
So the first question is, what is a good survival job to have, and how do you audition for shows with no agents?
Well, yes, we're in a brave new world right now. So that's a great question. I mean, survival jobs, at this point, I think there are probably more jobs opening up that can be done from your home if you have a computer, and obviously you do if you're logged in here. That maybe you can get involved with. I'm just thinking off the top of my head now with everything going on with this pandemic, is you can volunteer and sign up for things like contract tracing and things like that might be instrumental in helping people actually with this terrible pandemic that we're all facing. That's a possibility. I'm sure there are many other avenues that you could explore in terms of working remotely. And then there are now things opening up across the country and around the world in terms of shops and restaurants, outdoor dining. The actor's go-to job while I was coming up was waiting tables. And working behind a bar. I think you have to be very careful about that nowadays. But I think those are good, maybe some good ideas. I don't know, maybe terrible. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. In terms of agents, and right now in terms of being seen, that is a real good question. And I obviously don't have all the answers about that. I think none of us really does. But I do believe it's going to open up again. And I can tell you from my standpoint, as an actor who's had a long career, I am getting notices from my agent that things are going to be starting up again, and there will be opportunities. I think you just have to hang tight. And I think that this is a great time to to work on building your own craft, to work on the kinds of things that can get you in a position that you're really ready when the opportunities do open up again. So that's a rather long-winded answer to that, but
The next question is, do you have any advice for people trying to start or continue a career in the theater, given the new safety and distance measures with the pandemic and the limits that have been and will be in place for the theater in the foreseeable future?
exactly. All I can say is this is truly a question that is open, and we're just going to have to see how it all goes. None of us really knows the full answer to that question. All of us are in limbo right now. Every actor I know is waiting to see what happens. In the meantime, there are new theater companies that are starting up in virtual productions where people are, I've seen some really interesting virtual productions of shows. Of course, I'm attached to NYU, so I've seen some wonderful things from the seniors, graduating seniors there, that put together fantastic performances of stuff. There's a wonderful little theater company in Philadelphia whose name escapes me right now that put on a beautiful As You Like It that I saw online. One of my students from last year was in. So there are opportunities out there. But again, I guess I'd come back to the thing that I said before. Make sure you're ready when the time comes. It's going to come. We're going to open up. It's just a question of when.
So the next question is, what advice do you have for leading a company, especially during a long run?
That's a great question. So I do believe that when you're in a leading role in a show, you certainly are leading the company. That's a really interesting way of putting it, and I've never heard it actually put in those words, but I do believe it's an accurate description of what happens. Of course, the director is the head, and he's the one who guides the entire cast and crew toward the opening night. But once the show is open, it really is incumbent upon the entire cast, and certainly the leading actors, I believe, set an example for the discipline, the decorum, the way you treat each other with respect, and how you respect the material that you've been blessed with portraying every night. The wonderful writing that is the result of many years of work. A play or a musical doesn't happen overnight. And it oftentimes is the end product of years of writing. So it really is your job, I think, as a leading player to set an example. And I certainly try to do that. I'm human like anybody, and I've had my moments where maybe I've lost my cool, but I believe that's probably a pretty good description of how I've gone about trying to be a leader amongst the players.
Great. So vocal health tips during a long run. What worked for you?
Right. Well, rest is absolutely the first and foremost. You must get rest. So sleep is very important. And, actors want to go out and celebrate after the show because it's a great release when the show is finally finished, and you've had the rush of the audience applause, but you have to be careful because you cannot get into a habit of going out every night or a pattern of going out every night after the show because you're not going to have a voice left. It's very important. Obviously, hydrating is very, very important. I carry a bottle of water around with me all the time. It's absolutely essential. An essential tool to an actor's instrument. And then, like I said, checking back in with your voice teacher is a very important thing as you go. No matter how long you've been doing this, as I said, I've been at this for a long time now, and I still check back in to work with my voice teacher. So I think that's a very important kind of That's a great question, and I think it's very important to maintain your vocal health.
Um, how do you think, my apologies, how do you think is the best way to get into the acting world? Do you consider a manager is necessary to get into castings?
I have never had a manager. I will tell you that. For those of you who don't know, there are agents and there are managers. Agents have to be sanctioned by the actors' unions. So, Screen Actors Guild if you're working in television and film, Actors Equity Association if you're working on the stage in professional productions, and the agents must be approved and must sign an agreement with the actors unions, which is a list of rules for how they must conduct themselves, and it's a very important safeguard for actors that an agent is a signatory to the union's rules. So that's a very important thing, and no one really, I think, can develop a career without an agent. You can start without an agent, and that's absolutely the way most people start. I was lucky, as I said at the beginning of this webinar today, that I was introduced to an agent before I even started working. That was very, very lucky. But I had gone to open auditions, and there are open auditions once things get started again, and we're back in running order. You're going to have open auditions available to you if you're in metropolitan cities where Actors Equity exists. So you can get in the door. People do pay attention. As far as a manager goes, I have many friends who have managers and have been very happy with a manager. A manager is not a signator to the union rules, but the benefit, I think, of having a manager, or so I'm told, is that they only handle a small number of clients, so that they're really focused on you each day. And I think that, of course, that feels good and sounds good, and it can be essential if you're feeling a little lost in the fray, because an agency may have a lot of clients. Every agency will have a lot of clients. So a manager can be kind of like a right-hand man, somebody who's there kind of saying, have you heard about this project? And let me call your agent and we'll talk about you getting in for that. So it can be a useful tool. I will say that. I've just never had the experience of it myself.
Wonderful. How many songs are in your audition book? What styles do you recommend having in your book? Should you have certain composers or styles you feel, are there certain composers or styles that you feel need to be in the book?
Absolutely. So kind of rule of thumb, I would say, and again, everyone's different, and this is just a ballpark figure. I would say you should have 10 really good songs. Really, when I say really good, I mean songs that, number one, reflect a kind of diversity of musical theater. That also should include a pop song of some kind. Shows from the different eras of Broadway. I think you should have a classic Broadway, the Golden Age, what we call the Golden Age, which runs from, say, 1946, when Oklahoma first saw the light of day, to into the 50s. Then I'd say contemporary theater, maybe from the 60s through the end of the Sondheim Prince era, which was, let's say 1980, that kind of thing. And then the modern musical, which encompasses, of course, a broad range from then till now. There's a lot of material there. I think it's important that you don't get bogged down with too many choices. And when I say 10, I think that's maybe the outside limit, because in my experience, having 3 to 4 really good, solid audition pieces for yourself is going to serve you most of the time. But you're always going to face the possibility that an agent a director or a producer sitting behind the table when you've come in to sing one of your favorite audition pieces or something you think is specifically good for this specific show, will say, do you have anything by Stephen Sondheim, or do you have anything by Bach and Harnick? Maybe, that they will ask you that. And it's always good to have a nice background of stuff, to have a bench of solid recruits that you're going to pull out in a moment like that. That's a kind of general answer to that, but we can get into more specifics if you'd be happy. I'd be happy to have you join one of our classes, because that's certainly what I do with my kids at NYU, and certainly it's extremely valuable to have somebody outside yourself giving you feedback on what works best for you, and that's kind of what we do.
Great. The next question is, what were the challenges of adapting to new cast members joining when you've been performing the show for a long time? Was it ever difficult to adjust?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you're in a show from the beginning, you're all kind of, you start out in a rehearsal room, you don't have the sets yet, you don't have the props or costumes, and it's just you and the gang kind of figuring out what this piece is that we've kind of set about to tell the story of. And then suddenly you find yourself in performance, and if you're lucky, the show is running, and actors leave the show if you've been running long enough, or they get sick, unfortunately. So there are replacements that come into a show, and suddenly, as an actor who's been playing the part with a cast that's kind of come up together from day one, you find yourself faced with adapting to each other's rhythms, and so it's a learning curve for everybody involved. I have experienced this from both sides. I have to tell you, I've had experience replacing in shows as well as originating shows. I've been the original player in many shows, but I replaced in the Phantom of the Opera. When I went into Phantom of the Opera, the show had been open, I think, 10, 11 years at that point. And everybody was very much into their track and what they were used to seeing. So part of your job as an actor replacing is to fit into the place and the track that was kind of cut for you way back when the show first started. Your job, of course, is to breathe life into that performance yourself and to bring yourself, and that's part of the work that we do in class is how you tell the truth through you. You are now the person playing that role, so it's important that you tap into your own truth and your own talents and bring those to the fore when you're working in a show. So there are challenges from both sides. I don't know if I've answered that entirely, Tracy. You tell me.
I thought that was a wonderful answer.
Great.
I know it's probably a very complex. It's a very complex situation.
It's such a complex situation. It really is, because the actor who's coming into the role, who's replacing in the show, has rehearsal time with a stage manager and a couple of chairs in an empty room somewhere, and they don't get to work on the set with the actual props until the day of their first performance or just a few days before it, when they're brought in with the entire cast to do a run-through. And by that point, as an actor replacing, you have to really know your stuff and you have to be ready. But again, everyone knows how hard it is. There's nothing harder. So everyone in the show is pulling for you. That's another thing to remember.
What do you think are the most important things to get selected into a cast?
I think the most important thing is being yourself. And when I say that, I mean you still are playing a character, obviously. You're auditioning to be selected to play a character. So it's important that you have an understanding of that character and what the story is that's being told. But I think what's equally important is that you show up in an audition room as yourself, your genuine self, knowing who you are and knowing what your talents are, and bringing that entire amalgam of who you are and what your talent is to that performance in the audition. And of course, that's what we work on in detail in our classes. It's about finding your own truth in the song itself, in the story you're telling, and it's about how you then meld that with the character and with the story that is being told. So that's I think that's a general answer to that question.
As far as networking goes, what do you find helpful to keep in touch with creatives and casting? I sometimes feel like you have to go to every single event, every party, but it can be draining.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I don't think you can go to every single event or party or show. And, I think the networking thing, I think, can be overstated. I think it can be blown out of proportion. I think the important thing is doing good work, doing really excellent work every time you go out. And that's a product of hard work. It's a product of discipline. It's a product of study. It's a product of really honing your craft so that when you're out there, I think your performance is your greatest calling card as an actor. It's certainly learning how to conduct yourself in an audition is equally important. As I said, really bringing yourself to the audition is very important. But I think that people overstate the idea of networking. I really do. Obviously, in this world of social media, we have to use our social media platform to our best advantage. We have to get out the notice when you're doing something so that people know and they can come to see you. And I must say, I'm still learning that. I'm on that learning curve myself. I'm still working at that. I'm not the best at it, but I think these are all tools that you certainly can use.
Was it intimidating to replace people?
Of course. The simple answer is of course. There is nothing more intimidating, like I said, than having had 3 weeks of rehearsal. That's about all you get in a rehearsal room, and suddenly finding yourself that Friday afternoon for that they call it a put-in rehearsal, where you show up and you finally put on your costumes for the first time. Your costumes are finally done, and you're now suddenly standing in the wings about to walk out onto a stage and take over a role with a cast that has been in performance and is completely comfortable doing what they do. Suddenly, there you are. It's an extremely intimidating experience, but I will also tell you, there's nothing more exhilarating than doing it. The terror before you do it is I think as real as anything I've ever experienced. I remember I replaced in The Secret Garden. I took over from Mandy Patinkin in The Secret Garden. Mandy played the first 3 months of the show, just 3 months, and then I took over. And I remember sitting, and the entire set was on a giant revolving stage. And so I took my place for my entrance at the back of the stage in the dark where no one saw me. I was seated in an easy chair, and the entire stage revolved around as I came into the light, and it was my first appearance on Broadway in The Secret Garden as Uncle Archie. And as that stage revolved around and I started to see for the first time an entire audience of people sitting in front of me, ready to see my performance, I thought to myself, what have I done? What have I gotten myself into? The absolute panic that you feel is palpable. But I will say this, there is nothing more exhilarating than accomplishing it. And I've been lucky enough to do that, so I will tell you that.
And what do you appreciate the most in castmates, qualities or traits that make the difference to being truly able to, enjoyable to work with?
Great question. We're nothing without our castmates. We're nothing. An actor could go out and give a monologue, yeah, you know, and obviously we know about one-man shows, but there is nothing like looking into someone's eyes on a stage and seeing them responding to what you're saying, how you're expressing yourself. And there is nothing more grounding for an actor than to have that experience of sharing the stage with somebody who truly respects you, who is there to tell the story with the greatest enthusiasm and the greatest focus that they can bring to the show. And there is something, you know, the thing about we're all in this together. There's nothing more true than that applied to the world of theater. We are all in it together, and there is something so enormously gratifying and grounding, as I said, about sharing the storytelling with someone else and with a group of people as you do in a show. So the qualities that I find most important in my fellow players is that commitment to telling the story, and certainly that has been that's been my touchstone throughout my career, is commitment to tell the story to the best of your ability every time you go out on the stage, every time you go into an audition room, every time you're in rehearsal with your fellow actors, is to tell that story. I look for that in my fellow actors. I'm always grateful. And I will tell you 99% of the time I get that from every actor I work with. There are a couple times you think, are you really here with me? But that's pretty rare.
What are some differences you find between stage acting versus TV and film acting?
Yeah, it's a different kind of energy, I would say, more than anything, between stage and film. On the stage, obviously you're required to be able to project your voice out across the footlights and into the audience. Although nowadays we wear mics, most of us wear mics, but you still, there is something about, I can tell the difference between an actor who is relying on their microphone and someone who is really giving everything they have. I think there is something exhilarating about being in front of a live audience that you'd never get when you're in front of a camera. It's a very different kind of thrill working in front of camera. It's equally thrilling, but it's very different. And it requires an inward kind of focus and an kind of inner energy that you don't necessarily see on the stage, but is obviously very vital to performing for camera. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of a rough answer to that question.
Okay, well, someone just wants to say, not a question, but this has been really encouraging today, and your respect for everyone who is a part of the process of this career is really inspiring. Thank you.
That's lovely. That's really lovely. Thank you.
Did you ever feel guilty if you were sick or had to call out?
Yes, always. There is something traumatic about waking up one morning when you're in the middle of a show's run and realizing you don't have a voice. You've lost your voice, or you're so sick that you can't get out of bed. There's nothing worse, because you feel like you're letting everyone down. You're letting the cast down. You're letting an audience down. But sometimes you're just too sick. Sometimes you just don't have a voice. And so you always feel guilt about that, no matter how often it happens. And it happens over the course of your lifetime a lot. But you also have to accept that that's a reminder that you're human, and that you're going to get over it, you're going to get better, and you will be back.
Can you explain the process for casting? I've been studying acting for so many years now. I went to college to learn another subject, architecture in my case, and I was afraid I couldn't start acting at 25 years old. But you made me believe that maybe I can, so thank you very much for that. So the question is about the process for casting.
Absolutely. So first of all, 25 years old is really young from my perspective. It's, there is no, I tell actors this all the time. They say, what's the path? How do I get a career started? And my answer in part is there is not one path. There is no such thing as one path. I know of many, many successful actors who didn't start an acting career until they were in their 50s. It happens. There's no rule book about any of this. If you love doing what we do as actors, and you are determined to give it a try, to give it everything you have, there is a path for you. Of course, right now, we all know that things are kind of suspended. It's really hard right now to envision how one would go about getting their foot in the door in an acting career, but it will happen again. And in the meantime, I say work as hard as you can on developing your craft, because when the time comes, you want to be ready.
So what are your thoughts on dance training and feeling bad about not having enough?
I think an actor can never get enough dance training. I've had a lot of dance training. I'm not the greatest dancer. In fact, I've fallen flat on my butt a couple times on stage during dance numbers. But I've taken many, many dance classes, and I think it's important for an actor not to become a great dancer, but to be able to move well and to be able to use your body better in terms of expression. Your body is your instrument as an actor, and the more tools you have to manipulate that instrument, the better off you're going to be.
I think we have time for one more. Did the weight of some of these big shows ever feel like too much? I feel like some nights it might be difficult to feel like you can live up to the fame of some of those big, super famous shows.
I think that's partly what motivates an actor every night to go out and do his best. There is something about the weight of, the shoes, as they say. You're filling big shoes when you step into a role, and there is something both. I think it sparks the competitive nature in us. We want to feel like we can compete, and we can step forward and actually bring something to the equation. And a little bit of fear mixed in with all of that is absolutely healthy and important, because it's also, again, a reminder that you're human. And I think that all of these things are great are great aspects of doing what we do. Walking out on a stage is a great act of faith. You are saying, it's an act of courage and an act of faith. You are saying, I have a story to tell you. And here I am. And when you do that, when you walk into an audition room, the same thing goes. You are there to tell a story. And there is something wonderful and communal about that I think all actors love about being in the theater. And I think that's something that everyone behind the table at an audition and people sitting out in an audience are there for. They love that too. We all love storytelling, and we love to have stories told to us. So again, a long-winded answer to that, but.
No, that's wonderful. And we did have one more person say, thank you so much for this, much needed for motivation right now to hear encouragement and advice. So everyone's loving this, listening to you.
Great to hear.
May I say something? This is, I'm not on camera because I'm like a lot of people right now don't want to be seen at the very moment, but this is Joy Lober Anderson, Executive Director of the Broadway Mentors Program. And thank you, Tracy, my daughter, who's the Associate Director. And mostly thank you, Howard McGillin, for first of all joining us on this mission to share the real deal information with our students and with the world, really. I would like to share, our mentors are so modest, but folks out there, we have an opportunity because of the pandemic to be able to have one-on-one live classes with someone such as this gentleman sitting here. And unfortunately, if it weren't for the pandemic, or fortunately, he'd be working, so we wouldn't have that opportunity. Please feel free to visit the website. That's BroadwayMentorsProgram.com. Sign up for classes with Howard or many of our other mentors. And once again, we just want to thank you so much, and thank you, those of you who have participated today. Tell people about us, because we're still trying to figure out how to get the word out, but our hearts are with you all. And thank you again, Howard. And
Absolutely. Joy, thank you. Joy, thank you. And I also wanted to remind folks that on August 16th, I will be teaching a masterclass in the Stephen Sondheim songbook, which I am really excited about and looking forward to. And I hope that you'll consider signing up for that class as well, because I think we have a maximum of 15, 16 people. Is that right, Tracy?
Yeah, actually, it's only 15 people. We are almost halfway there. We have been keeping our prices, I would say, more than half of what we normally do in our studios because of the pandemic. The same thing for the one-on-ones. Many people are doing one-on-ones with other companies, and they are, I'd say, probably twice the amount, but all the mentors have basically said, no, let's try and stay as affordable as we possibly can in order to pass along this very important information. The class, the Sondheim class, is going to be on August 16th. It's a 2.5-hour class. You get to sing one Sondheim song, correct, Howard? And
absolutely.
The difference, I want to say just a little bit about the Broadway Mentors program, that as we know, we're the new kid on the block. We're a little bit different. Our classes are geared more toward one-on-ones and intimate programs. So it's not a group of 50 people or 30 people, which is not saying that isn't a great thing. We just like more individual attention. With most of our people are kind of legendary and as wonderful as you could possibly get. But if you go on, I would really encourage everyone, if you do want to do the Sondheim class, you can go on today. I think this is going to sell out pretty quickly, as they do. And you will get individual attention, correct, Howard? So if someone sings a song.
Absolutely. I was going to say you'll get individual attention, and how, because the idea is that each person brings a Sondheim song to the equation that day, and we will spend plenty of time on each singer, each actor, in helping them to tell the story, how to mold the story, how to use their own instrument, their own tool of set of tools, their wonderful emotional life. And I really look forward to this. I mean, I've worked with Mr. Sondheim several times. I've been in, as I said, Bounce, and I was in the very first workshop of Into the Woods. I played the wolf in Cinderella's Prince, and was actually asked to do the Broadway show, and I wasn't able to do it because of a conflict at the time, to my great regret. But and I made my Broadway debut in Sunday in the Park with George. So it's a wonderful work. The work of Sondheim is such wonderful stuff, and I really look forward to working with people on that. So.
I just want to clarify one thing, because I know people are asking questions. You will be seen on camera. Everybody will get the opportunity to watch each other. And in master classes that we do in Somerville, New Jersey at our studios, normally they're live, but we're doing it virtually around the world right now. We have people from all over the world, but probably right now we have Naomi in Wales and lots of people looking in.
Yeah.
If you do need to have a pre-recorded track that you can play in the background, and you will be seen. But I find that a lot of the students, when they're not on the hot seat, they're learning so much by the critique that the other people are getting. So it is a very interactive class, and hope you'll join us. And I will now sign off. Thank you again so much, everyone. And thank you, Mr. McGillin.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.